Welcome to the Contrarians, and tonight we have yet another in our Dark Horse series. Tonight we are looking at Tales from Topographic Oceans from Yes. This is the 1973 album that came out after Close to the Edge. Is this a bit of a dark horse? Well, it got mixed reviews when it came out at the time. I don't know. It's not as accessible as what came before. A lot more artistic, I'll give it that. But tonight, let's see. We're going to ask the panel, is this really a dark horse record? Because personally, I could think of some later Yes albums that could possibly be more of a dark horse record. So what we'll do, we'll go around. Well, I'm going to try to keep it to like 5 minutes because yes, we need to keep this to an hour. But at the end, we're going to tally up the points. So give it a rating out of 10, give your brief synopsis, and we will tally it up and we will determine whether this is a, shall we say, dark horse record. So I'm going to start out as people came on. I'm going to start out with, let's start out with Davy first. Let's start off Davy because Davy's got another show. So we'll go Davy, Todd, Bicycle Legs, Armando, Rand, and then Tim. And then we're just going to go around. So, Davy, you are a gentleman. But let's start out with you. What's your whole thoughts about Tales from Topographic Oceans?
I dare you, sir. I've never been accused of being a gentleman in my life.
I know. I was stretching it there.
I don't intend to start this evening, I'll tell you that. However, how wonderful that we're being asked to be concise and sharp, talking about this of all albums, the least concise
exactly. It goes against everything we believe in
the history of recorded music, perhaps. And you pretty much have done the review already, Grant. It's really just a matter of how much we agree with that opening gambit of yours. Is this far too inaccessible at the expense of the listener going for self-indulgence, or is it still something for which you can follow along? I've struggled with this one quite a lot over the years, quite a lot. And it took me quite a few breakthroughs with other John Anderson projects, funnily enough. It's as if I had to kind of climb the John Anderson mountain. Again, quite an irony because he is famously a very small man. But the apex of this particular mountain, which not much of a mountain on there, is so impossibly dense and so impossibly grandiose and pompous that it's very hard to say, yeah, I'm on board with all of this, because the band weren't on board with all of this, as we know. And John Anderson has since said he didn't really know about all the Hindu texts and whatnot by the what was it, the footnotes from the yogis autobiography, blah blah blah. Yogi Bear, frankly, it doesn't make any difference to the music to me. The music itself is, it almost gives you a sucker punch by starting with that all the vocals, but then it gives you the Rick Wakeman and you go, oh hey, this is going to be good. And then it's about 20 minutes before you hear another hook. There's just nothing to keep you going. Which again, going back just one album, Close to the Edge is a very dense album too, but it does have verse chorus in a few places, or it has motifs that it returns to. It has moments of sheer beauty. I don't think there's anything on this album that approaches the majesty of the Get Up, Get Down section of Close to the Edge, where the full cathedral organ hits in. That just reduces me to floods of tears almost every time. This album used to reduce me to floods of tears for a different reason. The wonderful thing about sticking with an album like this, though, is that it does reward you after if you're patient enough with it. And sometimes you have to accept that partially, because these tracks are so long and so meandering, some of it is never going to translate for you. You are going to have to accept that, sorry, some of it I'm just going to have to leave behind. And for me, that can be done in The Ancient, Giants Under the Sun. I can take the acoustic part from that. I can take the acoustic part from probably my favorite part of the album, actually, from Nous sommes du Soleil, and combine them into one track. And then take almost the best of the Revealing Science, which is the first 5 minutes, and then combine that with some of the remembering, but not all of it, because some of that, even with Stephen Wilson's remix in 2016, still sounds far too muddied, far too. I don't even want to say technical, because I think that implies that it was intentional. Whereas a lot of this was, as we know, everybody pulling in different directions, not knowing what they were making. Some of them thought it was free jazz, and it was actually sometimes recorded in a bar at a time. That's not how you record free jazz by any stretch of the imagination. So pulling in different directions. We know Rick Wakeman's feelings about the album. They're quite famously on the record. He hates it. But he also admits, as does John Anderson, that it would be a very different proposition had this been made in the CD era. It would have been a 60-minute record, probably. And I think that would have benefited it. And one of the major reasons to get the Stephen Wilson version of it is not just because everybody seems to love Stephen Wilson for some bizarre reason. I think it's quite obnoxious myself. I'm on record with that. But he does something quite wonderful on here, which is make single edits out of some of these tracks, which should be impossible. These tracks should not lend themselves to single edits. But he takes those little parts, the acoustic parts of some tracks, and turns it into a single, which again shouldn't work. Shouldn't work. But I'll give him this. Stephen Wilson knows how to edit things together, and if I was on a Lego team, I'd want Stephen Wilson to be in my team, because he's pretty good at building these kind of arrangements up. So yeah, I think there's a brilliant close to the edge type album in here, where it's one really great acoustic track, and then one really big epic, and then one kind of halfway house. And I think that is borne out by the fact that the next album after this, they would go exactly back to that formula, back to the one big epic and Gates of Delirium, and then two shorter tracks. And John Anderson's cred was completely killed by this album. The band didn't trust him after this to write. He had to kind of build himself back up, and it killed the run of success in America as well. They went from platinum, two-time platinum to gold on a double, which is nothing really by that standard. It was number one in the UK, their only number one album, which probably suggests that there was some good stuff going around in the UK in Christmas of '73, to be honest. But yeah, my overall feelings about this album, it's still out of reach. It's like the pyramid and the painting itself. It's on the horizon, but it gets closer and closer every time I listen to it. But I don't know if I'll ever quite get there. I think it'll always remain just out of reach. So I think Steve Howe plays some amazing stuff. I think Chris Squire plays some phenomenal stuff. But I also think they play some quite out of place stuff. And Alan White in particular is dropped in at the deep end really badly by this album anyway. And there's some parts that he plays that are completely inappropriate for the track, because he doesn't really know what he's playing it to. He doesn't really know what the track is supposed to be, because nobody else does at this point. It's a band trying to almost do the King Crimson style of improv without the capability of doing that. So, yeah.
Interesting point. Very interesting point. So, Davey, so you think that there really is an album here? If you could eliminate and edit it down, that you would probably have a as good an album as Close to the Edge.
Never as
good as Close to the Edge, but Relayer possibly?
As good as Relayer, certainly as good as Close to the One, and better than Tormato, and it's better than Going for the One, and better than Tormato. So yeah.
But didn't Steve Howe, though, you mentioned you put a lot of this on John Anderson, but didn't Steve Howe have a lot to do with this too? It was like the Steve Howe John Anderson show.
Yes.
Here we go.
He was kind of led by John Anderson saying he knows what he's talking about. And I think he would now. I think he would now know John Anderson because he's now old enough to know what he doesn't know, which is
Yeah.
part of the journey of life that we should all really pick up. You're only really as smart as what you don't know.
Yeah.
And John Anderson at this point was probably just believing his own hype after that wonderful album. But then I think, can you really blame him? Can you really blame him?
You
Because
can't blame him. No,
Close to
you
the Edge
can't.
was such a wonderful album that
Right.
hey, I'd probably be wearing a crown if I made that album walking down the street. So
So as it sits, what would you rate this out of 10?
as it sits, it's never going to go beyond seven for me in its
Okay.
current state. But I think there's a nine in here somewhere. But
Very
it'll
well
be
could be, but
and slash.
yeah. Well, seven's not too bad. I mean, it is Yes for crying out loud. So
Oh yeah, and
yeah.
believe me, in my catalog they go down to like twos and threes. So yeah.
They do that later on.
Oh
All
yes.
right, cool. Thank you so much, Davey. That was a great review. I appreciate it. We're gonna zip over to Mr. Evans over here and get his take on this record.
Well, I want to tell you about when I first heard this album. I heard it was 1979. A friend had put it on a cassette. And so you can imagine how it's, you're trying to get to know the album and you know what side you're playing and you can look at the cover. Imagine looking at an unlabeled cassette and just playing all 90 minutes. And I remember that this was the last album out of all the albums through Relayer that I heard. I heard all the other ones first, and so I remember it was a Friday night, and my parents were going to take us out for pizza. I remember my mom calling me and saying it was time to go during the last minute of this album after I had sat through the whole entire thing. And I remember going, no, I have to get to the end of this. I have to get to the end of this. Um, I really like this album, but you knew there was going to be a but. Um, I would say about this album, I think that the revealing science of God and the Nous sommes du soleil part of Ritual, I think that those are both remarkable pieces of music, and I think that they're absolutely beautiful. I think it's some of Steve Howe's most beautiful playing. I think even though Alan White plays inappropriate things sometimes, I like the way he sounds on this album, and I think that Rakeman wasn't into it, but he's got some beautiful sounds on this record. His Mellotron, which Mellotron always sounds spooky. It sounds extra spooky on this record, and I really like the way it sounds, and I think it's haunting and beautiful. But this is what I would do with this record. I would take Revealing Science of God and make that side one. This is very similar to what Davey said. It's just a little different. And then I would save the Remembering High the Memory for a different project, for a later project, because I think it's not as good as side one. And in fact, the highlights from side two and side three are the times when it reprises the themes from side one. So that's one of the things I noticed when I went through it again. But I would do that. Revealing Signs of God is side one. Side two, I would take the Leaves of Green part of The Ancient and flesh it out into a full song with a full arrangement. Short, kind of like the way Wonder Stories is on the beginning of side two of Going for the One. And then I would do an edited version of Ritual, which would mostly be from the avant-garde drum part. I would keep that, and pretty much from there on to the end. And that would be, I think, if they had done something like that. Now I know that totally discounts the whole lyrical content thing. And to be honest with you, I never really paid attention to the lyrical content of this. I never tried to make it into a story. I just felt like it was just too over my head. But I think that if they had done that, we'd be arguing about whether this was better than Close to the Edge. I mean, Close to the Edge would still be better, but I think you could argue if they had edited it down to something like that. So that's my feeling about this album. Speaking of the Revealing Science of God, there is a fan shot video it's from Progressive Nation at Sea, which is when Mike Portnoy tried to do a competing cruise with Cruise to the Edge, and they only did it 1 year. You can speculate as to why they only did it 1 year, but there's a video of Transatlantic playing the Revealing Science of God and John singing it. And if you
cool.
look for that, it's really spectacular. And it's great too, because that was back during the time when everybody was like, oh, can John sing anymore? He's been sick and all that stuff. And so that's a really beautiful version of that. But anyway, I would say I would give this album an 8.
An 8. All right.
I think parts of it are gorgeous, and I think parts of it are tedious.
So, based on your review, which I want to thank you for, it does need some editing. There's a lot of meandering and just a lot of.
Well, I didn't know that about the Steven Wilson version. I need to have that now because.
Let me ask you this. Davey might know this. I don't know. Is the Steven Wilson version still available? I have no idea. I never paid attention to any of that.
They make them limited editions, but then they randomly show up. So I don't think they're ever quite that. I think it's a false scarcity to make people pay full price for these things, to be honest. Because they're not numbered, they're not ever announced as being limited. They just kind of, So shop around. You will not have to pay too much, and believe me, you shouldn't. But yeah.
Well, there you go. All right, Todd Evans. Well, an 8 is not bad at all. So it doesn't need that much work because, I'd be happy with an 8. So, all right. So far, we're looking fairly good. All right. Thank you so much. Let's put it over to Mr. Bicycle Legs. How are you tonight? Welcome.
Yeah, well, it's this morning here, but
we have all different time zones here today.
Yeah. But yeah, just going to getting the Steven Wilson one, I think that the Yes ones, they're not so scarce, but not the way they are with the Jethro Tull ones. The Jethro Tull ones sell out and they go for big money once they're sold out. So, but I think the Yes ones are still reasonably well available. But yeah, this album, first, can we talk about the artwork? Because it's just gorgeous.
Sure.
It's one of my absolute favorite Roger Dean covers. The back there. It's sumptuous. And then you get, even in the inside, you've got little pictures to go with the lyrics, which I could never make head nor tail of, the lyrics, that is. And I never tried. I mean, by the time I got to Tales from Topographic Oceans, I had made peace with the fact that I was never going to understand John Anderson's lyrics. And that's at least in part because he doesn't understand them, So, but they sound pretty a lot of the time. So, who cares? But I'm going to sort of mirror a little bit of what Davey and Todd had to say about this album could be a really, really spectacular album if it was edited, but I would probably edit it a little different than either Davey or Todd would. And that is, for me, record 1, where you have Revealing Science of God and The Remembering, I would leave those two as they are. I think those two pieces are absolutely gorgeous just the way they are. I love both of those pieces. My problems really come in with The Ancient. That the first sort of 8-9 minutes of that song, I would just get rid of completely. I understand what they're going for. They're going for, avant-garde, free jazz, whatever. But it just sounds squally and just really unpleasant. It's almost like Steve Howe was trying to decide what are the nastiest, most unlistenable sounds I can get out of my guitar. And I'm going to play those for 9 minutes. It's like, no, I don't want that. The last 6 minutes of that song, when he plays all the beautiful acoustic guitar, and then you get the Leaves of Green song, absolutely gorgeous. I would cut that 6 minutes out and just have that. Absolutely beautiful. And then Nous sommes du soleil, there's some absolutely gorgeous music in that track, but I'm not a big fan of the avant-garde drum bash. I feel like it really sort of stops the flow of that track, and and you listen to it, and the song really does. It builds up and it builds up and it builds up, and then it just stops dead in its tracks. And then you have like 3 or 4 minutes of, again, avant-garde noise, and I don't need that. So for that track, I would probably just chop that bit out and edit the other 2 bits together. And then you would have, what John and Rick have talked about, that great 60-minute album. Because you'd have the 2 20-minute tracks at the beginning, then you'd have the 6-minute song, and then you'd have probably about a 15-minute track at the end. So that would be how I would edit this album. Having said that, I listened to this again last night, and even with the bits that are squally and noisy and avant-garde and unpleasant, the album still takes you on a journey, and I do tend to enjoy that journey. By the time I've gotten to the end of the 80-odd minutes of the album, I feel like I've been somewhere musically. So it's not a complete waste. It's definitely a good album. I think it could be a better album with a little bit of chopping. I would probably give it an 8 as well.
An 8. All right, excellent. We should retitle this episode. Yes, Tales of Topographic Ocean, the edit, instead of the Dark
Tales
Horse.
of Topographic Edits, I think would be a more.
I think that'd be more apt.
That'd be good.
Because everybody's got an opinion on how they would edit it. And it just makes me wonder.
All very similar, though. We're all keeping that acoustic part. We're all ditching a little bit of the avant-garde stuff that's just not their wheelhouse at all.
We might have a perfect album here almost. I think once we get done.
Yeah, it reminds me how people talk about the White Album should be a single album, and then when you try to cut things out, you can't do it. Yeah. This one, you can do it.
Yes.
You can do it. What Reed's probably sitting there. Rand's sitting there going, oh my God, we can't edit this. He's probably having and he's on mute, and he's all having a meltdown. But we're almost to Rand, so I'm looking forward to what Rand has to say. But yes, Bicycle Legs, excellent review, excellent edits. I can't argue with that. And at 8, again, we have another 8. So that's not bad at all. So we're going to throw it over to our Armando and get his thoughts on this. Armando, what do you think about Tales of Topographic Oceans?
Well, this was my first dive into prog. Okay.
Wow. Holy crap.
Funny.
It was just like head first, right into it. I remember I was taking a course, and my teacher, who was the ultimate Yes fan, kept telling me about this album. So I gave him, we swapped. I gave him a copy of Queen 2 to listen to, and he gave me this album to listen to, this one and Talk, right? So
natural pair.
What do I feel about this album? Okay. I do think Mr. Anderson maybe should have quit the herb a little bit. I don't know. I do think it's overreaching. I do think my notes here, grandiose, very grandiose. I think possibly if they maybe had released it, if they insisted on releasing a double album, maybe they could have released it in 2 volumes, because I think that as a whole, as a double album, I think it's maybe a little bit, I know it's a little bit too much for people to have digested sonically, Kudos to Atlantic for allowing them to do it. I'll give them that at the time, because we're talking 73, the land of prog, I do believe it's a good album. It's a little meandering, yeah. I do think that it's funny how we're all thinking the same thing, that if you just take away one track, you would have a solid album. I think for me that if you have kept the Revealing Science of God, the Remembering, and Ritual, you would have had, in my humble amateur opinion, a more cohesive piece of work, more digestible. Davey mentioned about reaching for something that's always out of reach. I think they reached too far and they fell off the end of the face of the earth at one point with this. I'm sorry, it's a little bit too much to take in. Having said that, I do think that for a debut for Alan White, I think it's admirable that he dove in the way he did. I think that Rick Wakeman did some fantastic keyboards and mellotron work on this. Steve Howe, fantastic as always. Chris Squire, beautiful work. I do think that Anderson should have fleshed it out more in his mind as to what he wanted to do than to just say, okay, give them like just a sketch, like a rough sketch of what he wanted to convey musically, and basically expected the group to sort of fill it in. And he's like, yeah, I guess we'll go with that. And then, like not really knowing what he wanted to do. And I mean, I think he almost tried to do it because I have this documentary on Yes. It's like a 3.5-hour documentary. And he had said that he read that one reviewer said that, what are Yes going to do next? Rewrite the Bible to music? And Anderson's response was, okay, suckers, I'll show you. It can be done. Well, you overreached. I'm sorry. It's just a bit too much. And I think this was where bands like Yes were taking themselves way too seriously. Like when they did these tours, when they did these shows, you had to show up exactly on time. The door shut. If you showed up a minute late, you were not allowed in.
Good.
Do you know what I mean? But it's like I understand where you're coming from with that, Davey, too, but you got to relax just a little bit here. I mean, I just think it's overreaching. I mean, from the chart's point of view, it was number 4 in Canada, number 6 in the US. So I did better in number 1 in the UK. So I did better in Canada than I did in the US, slightly. But yeah, I think and to get a single album would have been better, And if I was to give it a rating, despite all of what I just said, 7.5.
All right, that's not bad.
You'd still be well over a single album, though, if you wanted 3 tracks, Armando. You'd still be at an hour.
But you have to consider this. Think of the band at this point. These guys are a machine. I'm going to say this is the classic lineup. I'd rather have Bill Bruford still playing drums, but whatever.
That's why I don't feel sorry for when people say Alan White. I feel sorry for him getting thrown in at the deep end. I think I'd be quite happy being thrown into an album, a band who are currently multi-platinum success.
Right.
So,
he was a lucky man.
I think I'll take that. Yeah.
All right, let me just quickly amend what I said in terms of the single album. Make it a 3-sided album.
You still
do it that way. I mean, I just think that it's overreaching in some spots. And
well, I'm just curious. Were they doing a lot of drugs? Were they doing a lot of drinking? Eddie Alford, what did he help produce this at all, or was it Yes just taking over the control?
I just think
we've got this.
They had made Close from the Edge, which was a massive runaway success. So why wouldn't you double down and think you could keep going with that?
Yeah.
And somebody has to be the band that take it too far and get laughed out Ultimately, I think it wouldn't be Yes. It would actually be ELP who were the laughing stock. But they're almost kind of forgotten now because they didn't, when was the last time they were in the popular culture at all? You're talking decades and decades ago. At least Yes was still an ongoing concern.
Good point.
This is nowhere near as bad as some of the indulgences of Emerson, Lake, and Palmer in the 70s. Nowhere near as bad.
Right.
Well, yeah. 73, you're talking brain salad surgery from ELP. So
well, yeah. Well, that's funny. You were mentioning before, Armando, that your first prog album was Tales from Topographic Oceans.
Yeah, I know.
My first prog album was brain salad surgery.
Oh,
So
I think that was actually an irresponsible thing of your lecturer to do, Armando, because that's the kind of thing that could potentially have put you off for life.
Well, I think he wanted. I know for a fact he wanted to shock the hell out of me, right? Because
Yeah.
and it was just like, oh, okay. I mean, some of the like new, for me, just quickly, the Nous sommes du Soleil section is fantastic for me. I mean, that's fine. That's great. I just think that, like the ancient could have been taken off, or it could have been, I don't know. I just
Say it, Armando, you want
it's
to
a
edit
lot
it?
of
Edit.
information in one album to digest. You know what I mean? So I mean,
Well, yeah, it's a hard listen to sit through the whole thing. It's
yeah.
okay if you break it up to some degree. I can, yeah, I feel that way too.
But that's why I took the remembering off, not because I don't like it, but because it needs to fit on one record. It's either going to be two or it's going to be one.
Right.
Yeah.
And the songs are so long that you can't split it on two and cut a big chunk of it out. So
Yeah.
maybe that's why it's the way it is.
All
Two
right.
full records as well. It's not as if there's, quite a bit of space. It's two full records. Those grooves are being stretched to the limit.
Yeah. No, it's true.
All right, Armando, that's cool. 7.5. Still going with the 7.5?
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's not bad. That's not bad.
Ask me
Now,
about the
kids, get
walnut
ready
song.
because now we're going to throw it over to Rand. So, Rand Kelly, I know Yes is your band. I want to hear your thoughts on this one. We've never talked about Tales, and you have the floor, my friend.
Well, I'd like to defer to Tim and go after him if I could.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
I don't want to make
Tim
him
Darling,
wait.
is that cool? You ready to go? Rand
Okay.
wants to come in right at the end like a superhero. I get it. All right.
All right.
Tim Darling, I'll throw it over to you.
Thanks, Tim.
Well, first of all, I don't know what everybody's talking about, because if you look at this, it doesn't look very long. Look, there's not very many words on here. But this tape weighs a lot. Like, there's a lot of tape in this.
Yeah.
Anyway, but seriously, I'm here all week. It's interesting. I'm a relatively late latecomer to Yes fandom, probably within like the last 5-6 years. But having said that, obviously I knew some of their songs, and I knew about this album. This album was infamous. This is like, not comparing musically, but this is like Tales from Topographic Oceans is to Yes what Music from the Elder is to Kiss. It's the album that, we don't talk about that in polite company. Like it was the album people are like, oh, Topographic Oceans, that just makes me want to listen more. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why? What is it? Why? So there's a lot of things. So, I'm getting the music all at once and listening to it, just picking up albums, and eventually I picked this one up. I think, like Armando, I have the 2003 Rhino issue. Incidentally, I think it looks really stupid when they have Elektra. Should be Atlantic. I don't know what happened. There was some corporate buyout nonsense there.
I think Elektra picked up their contract for distribution reasons only at that point.
Because it's dumb, because Elektra's not even Elektra anymore.
It's the dumbest Elektra logo, too. Elektra has
been relegated to Rhino
logos, and this one stops.
Yeah, they should use that 60s logo. I like it.
Right.
Did you notice that E looks like the Enron and also that other what's that computer that does that
Dell. Yeah, it looks like the E.
Yeah, Dell. Yeah.
Well,
it looks like the Dell logo.
Yeah. I've got a couple of like Metallica home videos. It starts out with this logo, but it's like it's boing, but it bounces off, and I'm like, it's like
that makes it even worse.
It's
lowercase E.
Let me say real quick, because you guys may not know this. WEA stands for Warner Electra Atlantic.
Atlantic, yeah.
And Atco was Atlantic, so they're all the same.
I know, it's like this is manufactured and distributed by WA Music of Canada. Oh yeah, for sure. I know it's the same mother company, but aesthetically, I want to see this logo on my classic Yes albums, So anyway, eventually I dived into this album, and wow. There's a lot of everything. In Martin's Yes book, there's time and a word. I've just got the original version of it. But Rick Wakeman saying that they had to add all this padding to make it a double album. And he says, I can tell where the padding is, and it drives me crazy. So even though the Steven Wilson edit sounds interesting, I want the Rick Wakeman edit. I want to hear the album as he would have liked it to have been a single album, because it's really not that different from Relayer. Relayer's a strange album too, but I really like Relayer. Oddly enough, this album, they have a chorus that repeats Relayer. That's odd. But anyway, I really like Relayer, but it is odd. And I can see, like, you know, if you were growing up in the 70s, by the time Going for the One came out, you must have been like, oh, thank God, they're writing songs again. Holy cow. But anyway, but yeah, coming after the Yes album and Fragile and Close to the Edge, they were riding high. And I've read that John Anderson was inspired by the success of Yes songs. It's like, yes, John, that was a double album, but it's a double album of your best known material. Like, you couldn't go wrong with it. This is, it's like you're filling up a balloon with, I don't know. It's hard to describe. Now, we've all chimed in on how we'd edit it. Well, the way I would edit it isn't too dissimilar to the way what they actually did on this, which is Topographic Drama, Live Across America. This is when they were doing their 2 album runs. I know it's not the original. Yeah, I know it's not the original lineup. Blah 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 blah. But so they do Drama, and then they do a couple other songs, and then the album. When they perform the entire album, they do the Revealing Science of God, Dance of the Dawn, Leaves of Green, and then Ritual, Nous Sommes du Soleil. That's about how I edit this for not a single record, but a single CD. So it probably would still have to have been a double vinyl, but it could be a single CD.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And just not quite, like, I can't get that word padding out of my head after Wakeman said it. It's like, yeah, it's padding. It's like, we've got this is a good part, this is a good part, this is a good part. What are we going to do for 3.5 minutes to get there? Why not just I find it very, very, it's definitely not my least favorite Yes album by a pretty far margin. I mean, anyone who's watched this knows I went for Union. So, but it's still a hard listen to the whole thing all the way through. And the only other thing I'll add is that it's the only case where, when they put out deluxe editions of albums, usually what you want is more. You want the B-sides, you want the outtakes, you want the studio run-throughs, you want, the unreleased cover. This is the only one I can think of where I actually want less. Never heard tell of that. I want the undeluxe version of this. And yeah, I'll just reiterate. Yeah, the cover artwork is astounding.
It's one of the best. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's a case for collecting vinyl. I mean, come on. And just one more thing to add before I give my rating and turn it over to Rand. Similar to putting this album next to Relayer to complete the picture. Apparently, you can do that with Deep Purple Stormbringer and the first Rainbow album. The Rainbow Makes a Complete Arc. I've never tried it. I've never tried it.
I never heard of that. That's cool.
I think I read that inside a Deep Purple, in the liner notes side, a Deep Purple compilation. So I think that kind of stuff is cool. For a rating, given the album as it is, not an edited version, not the parts that we think are the best. Oh boy. Well, I'm going to give it a passing grade, but I'm going to give it a 6.5.
Okay.
And that's on the merit of the best parts of it, but it loses, it's like points deducting as the minutes go by of what I would term nothingness. So many drumless passages too. Like I'll give them credit. They did it and they managed a gold record out of it. So, wow, that would only happen in the early 70s, I think. So yeah, hats off to them for that. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 6.5.
I think that's fine. But, I keep thinking about it. I do want to add something, though. Out of all the issues that have come out of this record, I guess was it 2013? Is that when those came out? The Electra, the remaster, the deluxe edition is considered the best CD sounding version of it. Sounds better than the original 87 CD or 90 or whatever. You definitely want the remaster. That's not totally the same with all these reissues. I'm just throwing that out there.
I will say though,
I just have a very quick question.
Mm-hmm.
If the band members, because Rick Wakeman did the tour,
mm-hmm.
and 8 shows apparently into the tour. 8 shows apparently into the tour. He got tired of John Anderson saying, you know, could you please make sure you play the keyboard passage in the second movement just right, you know, night after night. And then he went on record as saying, you know, it's not the best album that we could have put out there. It's basically shite, right? Basically, it's in some spots. If the band themselves are saying this is not our best work, how do they expect the fans, or how can they expect the fans to embrace it as a fantastic album?
Well, Rick Wakeman was not. Yes, of course, he's just Rick Wakeman.
But I'm just saying.
But I thought you were going to go for the more. I thought you were going to go for the more interesting Rick Wakeman story there, where during the tour, he ordered a chicken biryani and
the chicken, the chicken curry.
While they were soloing, he sat and ate chicken biryani at his keyboard.
No, that's a good story too. But I'm just saying,
contempt he held the album in, which. Hey,
I didn't mean to hijack.
He was about to go off and do King Arthur on roller skates, so you know, whatever, Rick. You know,
he was a little bit distracted. Probably he was already doing something else.
No, but that's my question, though. That's just my question. That food for thought. You know, like
right.
Yeah, I just wanted to say with Tim's edit, you know how you could do it, because they used to do this quite a bit in the 70s. Is you could do it as a single album, have Revealing Science of God on side A. Nous sommes du soleil on side B, and then have Leaves of Green as like a bonus single that was sort of stuck into the sleeve with it.
Yeah, like Stevie Wonder did with
with
In the Key of Life,
or like they did with the classic Yes, like it came with a 45.
Exactly.
Trip found all the parts.
The idea of sitting through this and then having to sit through this is
right.
That is a downhill. That is a downhill journey for me. I adore drama.
That's my favorite.
Drama! I watched the episode. It's my favorite. I love these drama.
I loved it ever since it came out.
Intermission.
I would just pray for a bathroom break.
Yeah.
To be able to run to the bathroom.
Intermission.
Yeah.
Right, Rand. Come on, Rand.
Okay.
All right, let's go to Rand.
Chomping at the bit.
Rand's here to destroy us with facts and logic.
All right, let me make sure, Tim, you gave it a 6.5, right?
6.5, yes.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for that. Perfect. Okay. All right, everybody, brace yourselves. We're throwing over to Rand Kelly. And yes, this is his favorite band. I just want to. All right, Rand, go for it. Let's hear it.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for getting me on this show. This is like.
I don't think I did anything.
This is like getting invited into the big pool.
What are you talking about? Marco's the key master, not
me.
Paying
for it, my man.
Yeah, you paid for it.
You're the host. Anyways, I appreciate everybody at the Contrarians. And I'm going to say real quick that this album was released in 1974 in the United States on January 4th. And it's probably my most listened to album in that year. I probably played it more than anything else that year. And I fell in love with a girl named Marie who also loved it. And then we kind of built a church around this album and all the lyrics, listening to it in the dark with candles and stuff like that. Now, moving on, Circus Magazine did reviews of this album, a review of this album. It's the shortest review I've ever seen in my life. They always put up lipstick lips in numbered, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They gave it 3 lipstick lips, and they said savory, but for special tastes. And that was their review. And I'm going, how in the hell is anybody going to know what this album's about unless they buy it? And that's what they'd have to do, of course. So, Tim, I'm amazed that 8-track tape, because mine was pink. I had an Atlantic.
Yeah, mine's Canadian. Mine's Canadian is why it
Okay.
looks like that and has this down the side. I do have my first two albums are pink, and so it's Close to the
Okay.
Edge. Or the
Yeah,
US.
and you're right. It was a 120-minute tape, and it
Yeah.
used to clog up really bad because the 8-track tape, the design of that is about as worthless as screen doors on a submarine.
Oh,
Yeah. It's like they call it wedding cake. You got a spool here and a smaller spool here, and then it turns. Yeah, yeah.
I
Somebody
oh
ought to
no,
write
Rain, you
money.
got to watch it. We've got a 8-track aficionado down at the bottom. You got
took
to watch
apart
yourself.
dozens of those things
Also an
back in.
aficionado.
Okay, so moving right along, so I'm going to keep going. I was 21 years old when this was released. I had just gotten out of the Air Force, and I was like, this is the thing that made me the happiest. I was getting into Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Genesis and stuff like that, but I was already a huge Yes fan anyway, and I had seen them one time before this album came out, and then I saw him again when they were touring this album, and I never saw Rick Wakeman eating chicken curry. Just want to say in Sacramento he didn't do that. Anyways, that's a little joke I made.
Assuming you didn't go to every gig on the tour.
I'm going to get to the album right now. They changed studios. The Yes album, Fragile and Close to the Edge, were all recorded in the same place by the same guy, Eddie Offord, at Advision Studios. They went to Morgan Studios for Tales from Topographic Oceans, and John had this idea of setting up cardboard cowboys and cows and put a bunch of hay all over the studio. And then they started getting into, Steve and John had written this whole album on the Yes Songs tour in hotels. So here you've got Hindu religion and music and a cowboy atmosphere, like a barn in the studio. What could go wrong, right? Anyways, personally, I love this album to death. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. It made me so happy. It still does. I listen to it today, start to finish, on the 5.1 surround music channel on YouTube. I listen to everything. And I came to the conclusion that if there was a Desert Island disc that I needed, and Close to the Edge is my favorite album of all time, don't get me wrong, but I would choose this just because there's twice as much music. I wouldn't make an edit. I love this music. I have no problem with any of it. To me, it's just freaking awesome. Steve Howe uses an Octavia guitar pedal on the very first of the album. You can hear it. It sounds just like Jimi Hendrix on Purple Haze. It's phenomenal sound. Nobody else was using that at the time. And Alan White is using a drum synthesizer in Ritual. And Chris Squire's using a Guild Jetstar 2 fretless bass, mostly through most of the Remembering. And if I was to pick a favorite song on this album, it's going to be the Remembering. I said that the other day on the Yes Top 10 Songs. And I wouldn't change a thing. And to me, this is a 9.5.
9.5. Holy mackerel. Well, I wouldn't expect anything less from you.
Only because Close to the Edge is the 10. I can't really fault Close to the Edge, but I'd give this a 9.5 along with Fragile.
I do have
and
to
Yes
ask you, because I have to dash, if you don't mind. You gave a really high review to Heaven and Earth on Grant's channel recently. I think you gave that an 8 or a 9.
I did? I don't remember doing that.
Yeah, the first episode of This Is Prog on Grant's channel. Oh, sorry, The Quest, I beg your pardon.
The Quest.
Yeah. I love The Quest.
And you said that Heaven and Earth is also one of your favorites. So what to you...
Well, no, Heaven and Earth, I wouldn't say it's a favorite, but I understand what they're
trying to do. I think you said you had a
do.
sentimental attachment to it, or forgive me for misquoting.
Yeah.
What is your down period with this, with Yes, then?
The Trevor Rabin period. I'm not a big fan of 90125.
So if we gave you a talk, you wouldn't have appreciated that too much.
I like a lot of Big Generator, and I like Talk a lot. I was already a Trevor Rabin fan before he joined Yes, so it was kind of a surprise that he went into the band, but I was okay with it. I was happy about Asia. A little disappointed that Asia wasn't more prog. You guys talk about these prog albums that came out in '73. we didn't even know the term back then. It was just music.
Right. Yeah,
It
that
was
term
A to
came
Z.
later.
Yeah, it was A
Yeah,
to Z
yeah.
in the racks, you guys. You just go into a store like Tower, and all the famous bands like Cream and the Beatles had those little flags where you could find their albums. But there was always these miscellaneous sections in there too, and it was all just A to Z. I mean, there was no term called prog. It was all pop rock, is what it was called.
The damn final section. But
Yep.
Yeah, if I know.
what Rand, at the time, as someone who was a fan back then,
Yeah, well,
do you
you had to live
remember
through it. I mean, that's why I'm-
do you remember the disappointment though from fans, because it did receive a backlash at the time?
Well, I just ignored that. I didn't care what other people thought. I knew what I liked about it.
But that's not the question. Do you remember
True.
there being one though? Is my question.
No,
Right.
the critics were really mean to it, but they didn't like that style of music anyway.
But they're always,
Right.
I mean,
They
Rolling
didn't-
Stone
they
always
didn't-
down on things. But I mean, it wasn't a popular one. I mean, it didn't sell as well, even though it was a double, so sales counted twice as well.
Yeah, and also I would just like to point out that Yes Songs was a triple album.
So sales counted triple there. But so I mean, people didn't buy this in numbers.
No, people bought it. Yes, fans
numbers-
bought it because they wanted to know what it was going to sound like, and there was no way to find out unless you
Well,
bought it. We
they
didn't have-
clearly didn't. If it didn't go as platinum as the previous one, it didn't go platinum, so they didn't.
No, I mean, I'm just
Did
saying.
this
the
record
people that were
ever reach
curious enough
platinum?
to want it bought it.
No, whereas Fragile was 2 times platinum. This one was gold, despite being
No,
a double.
I checked it. I checked today. It went gold.
So
went gold.
this one would have sold a fraction of what.
Well,
close
Rick
to-
Wakeman didn't do the band any favors. He sabotaged the group by saying what he said. There's a lot of fluff that went into that album. So what? It's great. Mostly you doing the fluff.
Ooh.
I love his Mellotron work,
Ouch.
but that's the fluff.
It's
You know, that part that
definitely-
goes, da, 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 da,
I think he
think
plays
that-
great stuff, just not in the right places. It's all the right notes, just not in the right order sometimes.
Yeah.
You
Mm.
know
Well,
what-
they
you
just
know what
needed
the one-
someone to produce this record, and they didn't have that.
Eddie
They're
Offord,
not
he
good
did.
at self-producing if that's what happened.
I think what
they've
happened-
determined if they'd have hired us to produce it, we could have done a hell of a mix for them.
That's
I think
right.
what
Right.
happened is Eddie Offord was in a new studio and he didn't know what he was working with. And he was trying to make him sound like he had done with the last 3 albums, and it just didn't happen. I mean, the original bass on this is awful. You can't hardly even hear it. Steven Wilson brought this thing to life, and there's just no doubt about it. I mean,
Yes,
his 5.1 surround sound mix, which is what I listened to today, was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
phenomenal.
my
And
my,
he added in, there's guitar parts that I never even heard before.
my
I heard
mockery
some
of
stuff today.
Stephen Wilson is well known, but boy, can that guy separate instruments like nobody.
He's
Yeah, he's
famous
really
for
good
that.
at it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
also,
good.
I would just like to
As-
say, I love the Ancient. I
As-
love
as
it.
we did
I
say,
love
though,
what
the problem-
Howe does on the Ancient. He's playing a pedal steel guitar, that Showbud, and he's just, he's bringing in all kinds of melodies from before. He brings in Close to the Edge. He brings in parts of the Revealing Science of God. He repeats that lick 3 songs.
The problem being though, that also does illustrate where, as a few of us have said, Alan White's parts, for example, are out of place. That's even more predominant when he's isolated much more in the mix, like he is in Stephen Wilson's.
Now, I
Yeah,
gotta
but I
check
have
this
to-
mix out for sure.
I would have to agree with that, but I don't.
You know, the flaws.
I think Alan White does a fantastic job considering he just joined the band and he was
Oh, well, I
touring.
mean,
with
nobody's
and then they threw this album.
saying he shit the bed, but there are parts in this where he's playing something completely contrary to what the band are.
I
Well, was
just think
gonna
they were
say,
doing
I'm
a
the
lot of
contrarian.
coke and drinking
I
a
am the
lot of booze.
contrarian. True.
It also has to be said that with new
Well-
studios back in the 70s, what studio you recorded in had so much to do with the sound of the album. It wasn't like
Yeah,
it came
it's
to be
true.
where everything sounds the same. So year to year,
Right.
studio to studio, there was a different feel to
Well, I
it. And
said this the other day that Relayer sounded like crap because it was at Chris Squire's new studio and Eddie Offord didn't know anything about it. He just
Yeah.
showed up and he tried to make him sound the best he could, and they were playing music he had never even seen before. I mean, you imagine what he thought of when they flung out Sound Chaser at him? He probably
And they
said,
start-
"What the hell are you guys
Yeah.
doing?"
Oh, no, drop off,
I just honestly think that maybe, well, I know
See you, Davey.
for me that it was maybe too much content at one time.
Yeah.
For people
Maybe.
to.
Yeah, but I just made it up.
Well,
that's all I can say.
It's hard.
All right,
it's hard
kids.
to discount remembering the album when it came out and something that meant something to you at the time. That means something.
Well, I say this all the time. I'm 70 years old. You have to live it.
Yeah, well, it has something to do with it. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, you guys are, I can understand. You guys are kind of at a disadvantage because you're catching it, so many years later. And I'm glad you like it.
Well, I heard it in high schools when I heard it.
But it's considered it's considered, that album. You know what I mean?
It is. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. We're trying to figure out if this is a dark horse record. So let's look at our averages for one, and I'm going to throw it around, and we're just going to say, is this a dark horse record? And wrap this dog up.
I didn't even know what that meant until you said it.
Well, it's yeah. So we got a 7, we've got 2 8s, a 7.5, a 6.5, a 9.5. So let's calculate this up, and we end up with a 7.75, which
that's pretty respectable.
I think that's respectable.
Yeah, I do.
It's respectable.
I think it's considering what came before and what came after.
But again, no one is saying, just in closing, nobody's saying that it's a bad record per se.
No,
we're just saying
not at all. If they would produce something like this now, we'd all sit and go, holy mackerel.
If you edited it maybe down just, here and there, snip here and there, it would work better. It would be more cohesive in terms of what you hear on the album, right? I mean, again, you got to remember too, this is the 70s, man. Like, record companies were letting their artists on the rosters do whatever the hell they wanted. I mean, and they were just given the tapes and said, okay, and told to make something of this, promote this the best way you can.
Return on investment. So
yeah, right.
I'd like to give out some information, if I might, real quick. Steve Howe has hinted more than once that they want to do the Tales tunes that they never did on stage in so long. So what do you think those are going to be? The Remembering and the Ancient.
Yeah.
And they're going to do Olive Relayer.
Yeah.
And I will go to that show, and I'm going to try to get as close as possible for that one. I might go to 2. Because, I mean, this could be the last time I get to see Yes in 2024.
Well, I can't imagine them going too much longer. I don't know. They like money, so they might keep dragging it out.
Steve and Jeff are the old guys in the band,
It would be the same for me if Roger Waters announced he was going to do one more tour of the Wall in as a complete show. I would go like I did back in 2012. I would go, right? So everyone has their own
favorite
albums to listen to.
Yeah.
I mean,
if I go to one concert per year, if I was just going to do one show, it's going to be Yes. It always has been. That's always been my thing since 1972.
Yeah.
Okay. As for your question, is this a dark horse album?
That's the question. Does the panel? Yeah, is that a dark horse record? I don't think
7.75 for me would suggest that it is a dark horse album. It's not a classic. It's a good dark horse album, if you know what I mean.
I think so.
It's a well-respected one, but it definitely is that album for Yes. In the same way as Tim said that The Elder is for Kiss, or the other one that I always think of is A Passion Play for Jethro Tull. Is always considered that album where they just went too far.
That's my favorite Jethro Tull album.
Absolutely,
of course it is.
I adore A Passion Play.
And
I adore A Passion Play, but it is definitely considered by a lot of people to be that album.
I would agree.
These are divisive albums, which makes them dark horse albums because you can ask 10 different people and you might get 10 different opinions. If you ask 10 different people that like rock music about Close to the Edge, you're probably going to get about the same response. And I think that's what makes a dark horse album a dark horse album. Doesn't mean it's a bad album. just
No.
means it's divisive among fans of whoever it is.
Exactly.
And based
I
on
like
this
that comparison
conversation,
with,
there you
the
go.
Elder. That comparison with the Elder was pretty good because that's the only Kiss album I like.
I can see that. Yeah.
But
And
I don't even own that album. But I thought it sounded like Uriah Heep without a keyboard player.
That's
like
it a
lot,
an interesting way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. I really like that album. It has nothing to do with the rest of Kiss, but I like it. And I think one of the reasons I like it is that they had the guts to do it, because
I've always wondered what could that movie have been.
I know I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it.
Yeah,
But anyway.
it was a mess. All right, kids. Well, let's wrap
we
this.
get a 7.75. Was that
7.75? So
wow,
that's not bad.
I feel
think
good
that's a
about
fair
that.
rating. Yeah, that's a fair rating.
That's respectable.
And I think the panel says, yeah, it's not the best Yes album on the planet, but it's worth a 7.75. Is it a dark horse? I'd say the panel says it is.
It is a dark horse.
But, if you've got the complete catalog, well, I wouldn't start out with this record. But if you like all that 70s stuff, by all means, pick it up. Your mileage may vary on it. I don't know.
Well, all that stuff that you like about classic, yes, it's in here.
It's in there.
Will I listen to it more and attempt to dig into it? Yeah, I will.
Well, I said the other day, Tim, on the Yes Top 10 show that we did, I said Tales, I realize now, is just 4 Suppers Readies that sound different.
Yeah.
Yeah, could be.
That's the way to put it. Yeah.
All right, boys, let's wrap this up. I want to thank Davey Gallagher, Todd Evans, Bicycle Legs, Tim Durling, Rand Kelly, and Armando Venditti here tonight, where we looked at Tales from Topographic Oceans. So please subscribe, check out the merch link down below. If you want to be on these panels, you can join the Patreon, and yes, you could be part of the discussion. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.